Okay, so today I want to show you all how I went from a super general idea for a documentary all the way to premiering it in front of 50 plus people last weekend, which was an absolutely incredible experience. But because this is my biggest project to date, I just thought it would be super insightful to you all to see my process for making this documentary, how I went about shooting it, getting interviews, sourcing music, and then finally finishing it and editing it. So I hope it's useful and check it out.
Nice. Come on. Come on, you got it. You got it.
Now a quick side note, but if you haven't seen the documentary, click up here and watch it real quick because this video will make a whole lot more sense if you've seen it previously. But jumping right in, the first thing I needed to make a documentary was an idea or a concept, and this idea came to me over a period of time. I started to develop it and realized that, oh, this could be an interesting story. Because I had made videos for the climbing club in the past, I thought I might as well just follow them for an entire semester, document all the trips, and just kind of get the community aspect as a whole in the club rather than just each individual trip. So that was the general concept, and I kind of wrote up a bit of a storyboard on Milanote just to get the ideas on paper and just get it organized a bit. So that was really the extent of the pre-planning period. I also just sort of wrote down some possible interview questions I could ask people that would sort of formulate the story in the direction that I wanted. But honestly, at the beginning, I really didn't know what direction the story was going to go because I hadn't shot any footage, and I really didn't know what was going to show up. Because as you know, with any documentary, it's real life. So literally anything can happen, and you sort of just go with the flow as it happens, shoot footage, and the story develops in that process. So as you can assume, shooting this documentary was by far the hardest and biggest part of the project. It took over 3 months, over 17 days in 7 different locations across California and Nevada. So just a massive region of shooting footage and gathering B-roll and interviews. Now when it comes to specifically shooting the projects, I really just tried to get as much footage as possible, a combination of just the people in the club as well as just pretty B-roll of the places we travel to, and then anything else that I find might be interesting in the final edit. So when all that is accumulated, then I have a bunch of footage I can source through to put on top of interviews. But that brings us to the hardest part of shooting by far, which is getting interviews, especially out in the field. Like if we're in Bishop or Red Rock or something like that, shooting interviews with people is really challenging. First of all, it's really hard to get people to stop what they're doing, whether they're climbing, to come over and sit down and get an interview, even if it's just a few minutes, but it's challenging to do that. And then secondly, there's just a lot of issues in terms of lighting and sound. It's really hard to do well. And I definitely made some mistakes there, but it is in the field, so you can't control everything. And that was definitely a challenging aspect. Now the rest of the interviews were more professional. I lit them properly, I had proper sound, all that stuff, and we actually shot them in San Diego. And those were sort of just telling the overall story, the core of it, the most important stuff. So I tried to do those a little bit better since those would be the most looked at and listened to interviews in the documentary. But again, writing the right questions and then organizing people and shooting interviews is quite a challenging process, and I've definitely found myself getting better at it, but it's still very hard, and it's such an important part of the documentary that you really want to make sure you do it right. So between B-roll and interviews, that is the core of the film, that is the shooting, and let's jump into the next parts. So one thing on this project that I got to do that I've never done on any other project is have original music made by actual musicians, which was just such a cool process to witness and help out with.
Just play it all. 1, 2, 3. So I think throwing is 7th. Yeah, it's 7.
On each of the climbing club trips this semester, we've had a lot of live music, people around the campfire just jamming out and having a good time, and I've never heard that before, and I was astounded at how talented these musicians were. So after the trip, I got in contact with all these people, organized a time that we could meet and just record some music, and basically they just improv'd some incredible songs between their just known talent. It was really impressive, and to be able to record that and just kind of mix and master it myself was a really cool experience that I've never done before. I'm really happy with how it turned out. I think it just adds a really unique aspect to the film, which you wouldn't have otherwise. So making original music was definitely a great part of this process, and I highly recommend it. So now we have our idea, we have our footage shot, and we have some music. Now it's time to start editing our project, which is a very big challenge, especially when you're working with a documentary shot over 3 months with footage in 7 different locations and tons of different interviews. it's challenging. But the number one thing I can recommend with this, of course, is organization. Make sure all your footage is super organized and you know where it is so you can get to it quickly and you know how people are going to respond to questions and things like that. So I want to run you through my process for that. So to edit this documentary, I used Final Cut Pro, and basically I just created a library for the entire film, and then inside of that library for each trip I made a different event. So for example, for Bishop, I made an event called Bishop and I put all the footage from that trip inside of that event. Then for each of these events, I created a project, and inside that project, I dropped all the footage from the trip and I chopped it all up into the best part. So I basically made my selects for each project. So I had it narrowed down to like 10 to 15 minutes of good B-roll and content from each different trip location. So Red Rock, Joshua Tree, all those different places had that good footage narrowed down from the trip. I also made a separate event for the interviews from the trip. So basically what I did is I dropped in all the interviews, I chopped it up to make sure only the good responses of the interviews were in there. And then what I did is actually color coded each of the interviews, sections, and responses to the proper color of what they're talking about. So for example, if they're talking about the community of the climbing club, I would color it in a specific color, make sure all those interview sections are the same color between all the different people I interviewed, and I'd accumulate those into separate sections in the event and project itself. So basically I could see like, oh, all my community clips are here, all my clips related to climbing are here, and basically that makes it a lot easier to piece together the story later because all your clips are color coded and you can really see which ones say what different things. And then I did a very similar color coding concept with the B-roll and selects from each trip's project. So from each project, I dragged those into one final timeline, one final project, and I'd color code every single clip in there, all the different B-roll clips from Red Rock, Joshua Tree, Yosemite, all those different colors into what each clip represents. So again, if it's talking about community, it might be in this orangish color. If it's talking about actually climbing, it might be in this bluish color. And basically I just selected all those different clips and combined them together. So in a single project, there were separated color-coded sections that basically talked about different things. And inside of each of those color-coded sections was footage from all the different trips combined into one place. So it became a lot easier to pick through and actually find footage to pull out into the final edit. And that brings me to the final edit. So again, I basically just created another event with another project titled Final Documentary Edit, something like that. And I started accumulating the footage and bringing in the story. And because I had color coded and organized everything in those previous events and projects, it made it significantly easier to drag together into the final edit. So if I needed something about community, I'd go into the B-roll section with the selected color coding and I just drag something from the community section. It was super easy. And the same with interviews. If I needed someone talking about the climbing club as a whole or what they love about the club, I could just find that color-coded section, drag that into the edit, and it just made it so much easier to organize the final project. But this isn't to say that editing the documentary was easy. I probably had about 8 hours of footage total that I narrowed down into a 12-minute edit. So that's quite a bit of condensing, and it was very difficult to choose the shots and the pacing and all that stuff to make a coherent story. But once the general edit was done, I just dropped in the music. I added a ton of sound design to tie everything together, and basically done. Some color grading, color correction, all that stuff, credits, and just exported the film. That being said, it did take me about 20 times to export it, even on my new M1 Mac, because I had so many layers of sound design and color correction and high quality clips that it just kept crashing my computer. But finally I got it exported and I was able to show it to over 50 people in a little premiere party, which was such a cool experience just to have everyone who was a part of the documentary and who had seen it being made be there in one place just to watch it. So if you ever make a cool film and have a cool community to watch it, I highly recommend having a premiere party. Yeah, you really can't beat it. But anyway, I know this was quite lengthy, but that's basically the full process I went through from start to finish, making a documentary that is quite large in scope, has a lot of different moving parts, a lot of locations, a lot of people involved, and making it into a relatively short and coherent story. So I hope this was useful. Anyway, that's basically it for today. If you like the music in this video, click the link down below. You can get 2 months free in addition to Artlist's annual plan. They have really great music and I use their stuff in most of my projects. And if you like this video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe down below. It really helps me out a lot, and I will see you all next time.